I'm going to begin by kind of posing to you guys a question. How much does it really cost you when you lose an employee? So this is something that I'd like for you to actually answer me back on. Answer this in the chat for me. I know there's a little bit of a delay, and that's fine. So go ahead and give me an answer about that. What does it cost you when you lose an employee? So I'm asking that question purposely open-ended, so I'm not looking for an exact answer. There's no right or wrong answer here. But just think about it. What do you lose? And that's going to sort of set the tone for what we're going to talk about today. And then I'll come back to that question in just a minute after you've had a little bit of time to answer there. So this presentation is really for people who are sort of frustrated with their current situation. They feel like they've got more personnel issues than they wish that they had. They feel that they're worried about people going to their competitors, employees leaving to go to their competitors. And they want to be able to do something to build stronger loyalty. They know that there's a better way out there, but they're just not sure how to get at it. And this is a frustrating thing that I talk to clients about a lot. And unfortunately, I think there are so many solutions in the world that we often pick the solution that is the most flashy, the most fun, and we don't necessarily pick the solution that always works. And so what I'm going to talk about today is how to really select the things to do, the initiatives to go ahead with, or the projects to work on that do carry the most impact for the money, for the amount of time that you spend on them, and are something that aren't just a quick flash in the pan, but are something that once it's completely, once you've integrated them into your business, they kind of take on a life of their own and continue to create good culture for years to come. So I'm going to check out the comments here real quick and see if we've got some. Okay, so someone says at least $5,000. I posed this question to someone maybe a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about it, and they said, maybe an annual salary. What we do know is it's about $46 billion every single year gets spent on these sorts of things. And what I mean by these sorts of things is it's not just, simply losing the employee. It's also cost in trying to rehire someone. There's cost in training a new employee, and there's a lot of things built into that process. But on top of that, unfortunately, there's so much knowledge that can be lost. If people have the awareness of your organization, that's something that can be lost. Someone leaving can cause your culture to take a hit because maybe they were a champion for your culture, or maybe somebody, feels a little less connected because that person's gone. So there are lots of different ways that we can measure this. I see somebody says varies. Teresa says varies, but always a loss due to time, resources, and onboarding process. Yeah, absolutely. So that's what we're going to be addressing today. And this is a question that when we try to hit this head on, I think the best place to look for kind of a good model for what our high-performing, strong teams are goes back to the framework that's shared in 9 Lies About Work. And I actually think I was listening this morning and someone else referenced this book. It's a great book if you haven't read it yet. Marcus Buckingham, and I believe Ashley Goodall is his name, wrote this book, and it's built on lots of research that's been taking place for decades by Gallup, and they've kind of taken it a step further and pointed to 8 specific things that are components of high-performing teams. So these high-performing teams are the teams that stay, the teams that are productive, and, ultimately those teams that are more loyal. So what we wanted to be able to do is have them, have employees to be able to connect on all 8 of those levels. So that's the framework that I sort of use for this model. And that's something, if you're interested, you can dive into that a little bit more in their book, or reach out to me and we can talk about that more in detail. But we know that those are the most important 8 things. So those are the things that we want to try to affect. So just to give you a little bit of insight into those, there are things like I understand the mission of the company. I get to use my strengths every day. I feel connected to my team. They share the same values as me. Let me think. Those are 3 for you. Those kind of give you a general idea of what we're talking about here. So moving on, how are we able to create that culture that makes us loyal? What I would posit is that we need to have something called a nurture culture. A nurture culture is the opposite of a toxic culture. So we've all are kind of familiar with this concept of a toxic culture. We're certainly familiar with the concept of toxic people. But these are cultures in which people don't do very good work, that they don't feel good about the work that they're doing, and ultimately they lead to burnout and stress, and productivity is low, turnover is high. And so what we want to be able to do is build a culture that's a nurturing culture, a nurture culture. And that's where we have leaders who are truly supportive of those at the company, and really being able to give them opportunities, treating them as individuals, using their strengths, those key components. So there are 4 ways that we can do this, and I'm going to go through each of those 4 ways and kind of give you some examples of those, and hopefully you'll be able to take some of those back and use them at your office. So the first one that I'm going to mention today is utilizing strengths. So we want to be able to concentrate on strengths. The reason I'm positioning this one first is because this is the number 1 correlated aspect of a person's employee experience that leads to loyalty. And that's a 2018 Gallup poll finding. So what we understand is if people are able to use their strengths, they will stay, they will be more productive, and they've actually found that our customers will be more satisfied. And those are 3 things I think we would all like to get a little bit more of. So concentrating on strengths. How do we build a culture that concentrates on strengths? Number 1, you yourself need to know your strengths. And I know I'm talking to a group of people right now who probably know a lot about their strengths. I actually talked to a group of veterinary medicine professionals a couple weeks ago around the same topic. And this was something that was completely breaking news to them, that you could test for your strengths and those sorts of things. But I'm sure you guys are a little bit more aware of your strengths. So know your own strengths, know the strengths of your employees. So again, I'm going to suggest that you use an assessment tool to do these kinds of things. But where it really gets good is when we can change our performance management procedures so that we are rewarding people for leaning into their strengths and not focusing nearly as much on those weaknesses. So this is something that studies have shown us time and time again, that it's incredibly important that the strengths are used, but we make very little progress when we focus on weaknesses. So we've got to, number 1, lean into strengths. Number 2, we want to be able to create a culture code. So a culture code is something, just like a dress code teaches you what to wear at the office, a culture code is something that teaches you how to behave at the office. And I probably use teaching there maybe a little outside the bounds of how we normally use that word. I'm gonna change that word to say it explains how we act in the office. And this is not something that's created just by leaders, but something that's created from the entire organization. We can get together and we can say, this is the way that we have decided to behave. So what I mean by this is we can say specific things. Like, for example, I was working with a commercial real estate company. For them, it's very important to sort of get outside of their comfort zone. They are very innovative in the things that they do. So one of the things for them is that we value discomfort. And they're able to show in a number of ways in certain times in their history where they have done that. They're also able to, have check-in questions and those sorts of things that all tell the employees what it means to live in discomfort. And we're not talking about the bad discomfort here, but that discomfort that allows you to be innovative and kind of stay on the cutting edge. And so you can get together and you are able to kind of go back to these three basic things. Why do we exist? How do we interact with each other? And what are the specific behaviors that we use as norms? So you describe all three of those things. And with the combination of those three, you're able to really clearly show what expectations are for your team. The next component of our nurture culture is going to be communicating regularly. And this is something I feel like I most often hear this as a complaint from the employee that, is unhappy with their job. They often seem to pose this in a question of, is this something my boss should have said to me? Or trying to figure out, like, why is my boss not telling me this? Those kinds of things. So communication, we all know, is so important, but it is tough. And I think where we fail most often is we don't have a systematic way to communicate. So we want to be able to install a system that really does set aside time for people to be able to communicate more clearly. So the first way is through one-on-one meetings. And many of you guys have probably heard of this concept before, but I believe it's probably the single easiest thing that anyone can do to improve their communication with their team. So you first begin by having these one-on-one meetings, maybe once a week or once every 2 weeks, and this is with direct reports. And what's so important about this is it's set aside time. Both of you understand that it's set aside. Both of you understand that you guys can talk about anything that, it is important in the moment. And it's really a great opportunity to build trust and ultimately build loyalty. So I'd start with one-on-one meetings. The second thing is having monthly all hands meetings. And, in a global company, we're not talking about meeting face-to-face. In most cases, obviously today, we don't do a lot of face-to-face meetings. This is something that can be completely done electronically. But the value of getting your entire organization sort of looking each other in the eye, if you will, whether it's a Zoom meeting or whatever it is, and being able to sort of get everybody on the same page from a mission standpoint is so critical. And then finally, I would suggest doing something like a yearly culture camp. And what a culture camp is really a deep dive in the culture that you guys are trying to create. So once you've made that clear, conscious effort through your culture code to describe what your culture is like, you can take the opportunity to, get together once a year and do work around how you want to interact with each other. As a culture, as a team. So there's three. Your last one is going to be celebrating wins. So celebrating wins is so critical to being able to continue progress and to helping your team feel appreciated. I would say this is something that we all as leaders would like to say that we do, but few do really well. And what I mean by this, and there are a few phrases that I've heard so many times that it's almost ad nauseum. Things like, you guys are doing so well, or just keep doing what you're doing. These sort of common phrases that we hear in the workplace may actually be doing more harm than they are good. And that's a whole nother conversation. But what we know is that what we say when we celebrate or what we say when we're encouraging our team, it needs to be specific and it needs to be individualized. So we cannot just give these, large praises that sort of praise the entire team and expect that our team is feeling that they're being appreciated. So just to get more tactical with that, I mean, there's lots of different ways that we could approach it. But think about what your team appreciates the most or what the individual appreciates the most. So while some people prefer having, praise in front of the team, others find that embarrassing and would appreciate that to be done in more of a one-on-one meeting. And you might be saying, like, how do I know these things? This is all part of getting to know your team better. And that's something that can be done through our one-on-one meetings. But ultimately, being able to individualize that goes a long way. And we know that it's not just money that's going to help show that you appreciate people. I think that's a big misconception, is that you need to be able to offer promotion or you need to be able to offer higher pay in order to show appreciation. But actually, the Gallup poll had a great thing. I think it was 2019, even as recent as that, where out of the top 5 things that were important to people, the top 3 had nothing to do with compensation, had nothing to do with promotions. It all came back to things that could be done completely for free if we sort of had a system in place that helped us to remember to thank our people. So one of the things I often like to say to my clients is that good intentions do not equal good culture. And so I know you want to probably be able to praise your team, but having an actual system in place that allows that to happen can get much more complicated. So just to take that a step further, think about setting up sort of a timeline for employees so that you can recognize great times that a person might need some praise. So particularly when someone is onboarded, right from the get-go, start with a word of appreciation. And this isn't something that's superfluous. This is something that, hey, you did it. You earned the job. Thank you so much for applying here. And go ahead and send them a card before their first day even in the office. And I'm sure some of you guys do that, but I think it's a great way to start out a good relationship. Next, think about different parts of their journey. So after they've finished maybe a week of employment, a month of employment, 90 days, if you don't have a system set up like that, that's critical. And in those times, this is not about evaluating the person's performance. This is completely about looking for opportunities to praise them, looking for opportunities to catch them doing something right. So that's one way we can look at it. Another way we can look at it is go ahead and map out milestones. So maybe milestones along a project. So for example, if you know someone is working on a web project, maybe when they get the site framed up, go ahead and mark that on your calendar. They're planning to have it framed up, say by May 1st. Mark it on your calendar. This is a time that we should celebrate. And go ahead and systemize this so it's easier for you to recognize when opportunities for appreciation come up. And if all else fails, and this is sort of the most hokey, simplest advice that I give to leaders sometimes, but I found so many people really appreciate it. If all else fails, in your pocket in the morning, place 5 coins into your right hand pocket. And as you go throughout your day, look for opportunities to praise people. And we're talking about, again, very specific praise. Like, I love the way you handled that call with that customer. You were so patient, or you were so kind. Let's be specific with this. But throughout the day, just move 1 coin from your right hand pocket to your left hand pocket until you've got all 5 coins in your left hand pocket throughout the day. And, this is not something that has to be done in person. Obviously, it's something that when we're interacting with each other throughout the day, no matter what platform we're on, we can find ways to praise each other. So those are the 4 ways. We want to concentrate on strengths. We want to be able to create a culture code. The third one is we want to, oh, I've just lost my mind here. I think I changed my notes. Maybe somebody else can remind me in the notes. And the fourth one is to celebrate our wins. So those are the 4 things that you need to do to strengthen your culture. I'm sorry I didn't have slides for you guys today. I don't know what was going on with our technical abilities here, but I think it was still fun to be able to share a few things with you guys. If you want to check in with me or get to know me any better, you can follow me on LinkedIn. I'm just Kristen Mashburn, and I post a lot of leadership related content there. So